baby female dog. We need a poop fairy. Do you order us up a dog poop fairy?
You wouldn't believe it.
You wouldn't believe how much poop comes out of a dog.
It's violating some fundamental law about eating out.
More comes out than goes in. Do you have a dog, Bruce?
Not anymore. I've had them my whole life.
Yeah?
But this has been the longest time in my life without a dog.
I'm sort of petless too. I went through 2 horses and 13 cats in 7 years. Financially, it almost bankrupted me.
Really?
I mean, there were months we were spending $1,000 a month on vet bills.
Yeah. Wow.
And then emotionally, it was just like, you know, I just don't think I can stand the loss of another creature.
Yeah. Yeah, that is tough.
Yeah.
And you know, like vet bills, it's kind of involuntary, you know?
Exactly. What do you do?
Yeah.
Well, what are your choices? You know, you have this little creature, and the thing you're looking at, and you're like.
Yeah. I used to live in Austin, Texas, and my buddy went to go, his dog kept getting out of the house. And so he went to the feed store and got some hot wire fencing. He got the resistors and all that. And he got all this wiring, and Dave went up to him and said, man, you know, in those days, it was like $50, all this for, you know, a dog that keeps jumping over the fence.
Yeah.
And he goes, a box of shells is $2. Yeah.
I think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Amazing. You know that little otter that went viral on the website?
Yeah.
It was our otter. It was down at Onion.
Oh, really?
The one that's in Chicago?
Oh, our otter, it's our little baby.
Wow, that's cool.
Was it something 681? Top 681? They call it. But it was right there, you know where Waddell is, where that
Yeah.
site is?
Oh, yeah.
It was just between Onion and the shore. I've seen its parents out there for years.
They're real territorial.
Really, yeah. The males, I guess, tend to venture off more than the females. There's been one living up here at the yacht, at the boat harbor for years.
Really?
Girls out there at Sam's, you know, the little dock there behind, at where Sam's restaurant is, the dock you can see there. It hauls out there, and lay there on his back, sun himself. It's very cute.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Good, how are you?
I presume that that's my name, but don't know for sure. Yes, it is. Hate to see the wrong seat. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Tom.
Hi Joe, how are you?
I'm good. I'm kind of tired. I've been up since 5:30 working, so it's a long day for me.
Yeah, for sure.
But other than that, I'm good, and I'm in good spirits, so.
2 nights in a row, I
All right, yeah.
think. Didn't kind of crazy.
Yes, indeed.
Where's the time clock so I can clock in? You guys weren't at the ditch meeting yesterday.
Ditch meeting?
The ditch.
Who's ditch?
That was a good meeting, by the way.
I thought so.
Really
I thought it
good.
was productive.
And no one was on, you know, everyone was being cool. There wasn't any kind of like tension. Good ideas were coming out.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Dante did a good job, you did a good job. The company did a great job.
Yeah.
What was the name of that company?
Calendar.
They did a great job.
Calendar. And then SWCA, and then Shop and Wheeler, and then John Powers. Associates, the environmental guys.
Be interesting to see what the price tag comes in at.
what scares me. But,
That's gonna be huge.
well, it is, but, you know, we'll see what it is.
We're gonna need people that know on post that can help us.
Joe's gonna be competing for.
We're gonna need grant money, Joe, for the Kehoe ditch.
Do you? Okay,
We need-
tell me what you're trying to do.
We're trying to develop a riparian habitat in the Landscape property where the sand plant is.
Okay,
And we wanna do it so it's like a win-win for everybody.
okay,
And it's gonna, instead of Kehoe ditch being down behind Kehoe residents, it'll be through the Landscape.
it'll meander.
Yep,
That sounds like a wonderful project.
yep. We need people like you that know about this stuff and get involved, and then get other people involved, and then kind
Yeah.
of figure out how to fund it correctly.
I'd be happy to help you with that.
That'd be awesome.
There's
I know-
about
I know about some of them.
753 million of that 7.1 billion water balance that is dedicated for stream restoration and riparian
Mhm.
restoration.
That's what we need to tap into.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Tom was right, there's a lot of money for riparian habitat,
Yeah.
a lot, yeah.
I think
And that would be really
$750
cool
million
if we had a
yeah.
showcase, like, you know, just to show the problem that we've had, 10 years of this problem,
Right.
20 years. And then show what the outcome is, and it could be a real good showpiece.
Yeah,
We could be like on the map, hey, Half Moon Bay did it, they pulled it off.
yeah.
What is the problem out there? Is it erosion or is it?
Yeah,
flooding?
total erosion.
There's no foundation.
Cause it's channelized, right, behind those
Yeah,
homes,
it's
is that
straight
the
down,
problem?
it's straight as an arrow, so it
Yeah.
comes flying down, and then when it comes,
Yeah.
it does this whirling down, and it
Right.
takes the right bank out with the home side.
Scours away,
Yeah.
yeah. That sounds like a fun project.
So when you see it on the agenda, and you've got some good ideas, please come forward. Cause it's not on, it's in the development stage right now,
Yeah.
the preliminaries.
Yeah,
We're looking at rerouting the whole creek on that side of, or the ditch on that side of the highway, or are they going to like an
Well,
overflow?
our intent would be, what everybody was kind of focusing on last night was utilizing Lanster property, who, Sam owns that property, they bought it to do some, you know, thinking of some pipes and things like that, but then they realized, oh boy, we just bought a riparian habitat, that's not
Yeah.
gonna work.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so here's the thing, they wanna run some pipes down there, right? They know it's riparian, we know it's riparian, we all know it's riparian, but if we do it all in one shot and we do it where it's less impact, you get your pipe in, we get our riparian, we set it all up and just leave it alone and walk away and not have, you know, disturb the environment, that's the best way to do it, instead of digging and drilling and in 5 years digging and drilling and digging. and
Yeah,
drilling.
just scraping it out.
Yeah. So if Lanstra's on board with it, then we can really do it right.
Do you have a quorum?
Yeah, I'll give them,
Is this it? Is this all we got?
yeah, that's supposed to be here, right?
Roman?
Yes.
Yeah. Give them,
He's always late.
I heard, good traffic's quite a bear.
Yeah.
We need to do something
What's
with
the
this
deal?
traffic.
Well, okay, there was an accident at Terrace and Highway 1 about 4 o'clock, which of course
Oh.
is gone. But you gotta remember that highways have memories. It's been proven that, you know, there've been studies done that an accident or slowdown 6 hours ago, 6 hours later, you'll still have a slowdown at certain points in time. It's the way the traffic flows. I mean, it's a scientific evidence of that. It's, so, you know, even though it's gone, these things happen.
There he is.
And there it is, you can tell us all about it.
How was the traffic?
Right.
How was the traffic?
Pardon?
How was the traffic?
What traffic? Alright.
I just don't remember.
Okay, good evening, welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, November 25th, 2014. Please rise with me and recite. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bruce, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Rosenblatt? Absent. Commissioner Roman?
Here.
Commissioner Demand?
Here.
Vice Chair Johnson,
Here.
Chair Conroy.
Here, thank you, Bruce. First is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes for October 28th, 2014?
I move that we approve the minutes of October 14th.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Next, planning manager report. Bruce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just give you a quick update on some of the planning department activities. On December 4th, we have a community development director hearing on an electronic vehicle charging station next to City Hall in Kelly. That triggers a coastal development permit. And then we also have an addition at 431 Miramontes. And then on December 9th, we have another community development director hearing at 170 Correas, which is in addition to an existing single-family residence. Just to remind you folks, we have your next planning commission meeting is December 9th. We're going to have a planning commission general plan study session and open it up to public comment and take public hearing and so forth. So that we expect that to be a pretty lengthy meeting. And then on December 16th, City Council meeting, we have the Sam Esha parcel adoption of the LCP amendments for sensitive habitat. If we pass the housing element at this meeting, it will be on for the council consideration. Also on December 16th, we have the Carnoustie annual development agreement reporting period, and then also the Major D allocations for this for the calendar years of water allocations for Major D. We're proposing to cancel, we don't have any items at this time for the December 23rd meeting, so that would be canceled. And then on January 6th, we have another community development director hearing for street improvements, another coastal development permit. And then another addition at 712 Monte Vista. And then for your meeting on January 13th, we're expecting kind of a heavy development review agenda. We're going to have a parcel map at 324 Main Street, and then a condominium map at 501 Church, the city skate park project next door here, and then quite possibly a gymnasium addition to the school district. All on your, one of those might slip, but if it does, we've got a cushion for your meeting on January 27th. And then on the January 20th council meeting, we have another general plan study session planned for the city council. So that'd be January 20th at 7 o'clock. And then if we need to, we will also be recirculating the design guidelines for your review. And we're targeting that for your January 27th Planning Commission meeting if we don't need that meeting for our other development review items. I didn't have anything else to report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, Bruce, I was looking at your project tracking start. Just have some questions for clarification and education purposes. Looking at two items, for example, 22 and 24. One is the CDP on Johnston Street. The other one is a CDP for paving and street removal. And I noticed on project status it said, notice of future action received by Coastal Commission, NOFA, for both of those. If you look at those items.
Yes, those were approved at the director's meeting, and we're noting the dates that the notice of final local action was transmitted to the Coastal Commission.
Okay, to help me out over here, we're talking about properties and that are on the east side of Highway 1. So tell me what the logic and the issues and the city code and zoning code is for that.
You know, even though they're outside the appeals jurisdiction, we still have to file a notice of final local action, even if they're outside the appeals jurisdiction. One of these was for paving next door to the fire station for a training area. And then the other one was in addition to a single-family residence at Johnson.
Okay, so basically this is just administrative only.
Yeah, it's perfunctory. We just are required to submit proof of
Thank you.
final local action.
Good.
Any other questions for staff on the agenda forecast? And we will move on to the public comment period. If anyone here would like to offer public comment on any item that's not on the agenda, this is your time to do so. But if you would like to speak on an item that is on the agenda, we ask that you fill out a green sheet that Bruce has. There may be more up. Feel free to do so. With that, we will move on to the public hearing items. There's only one item on the agenda tonight, which is our general plan housing element update, PDPG-012-14. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the third time that the housing element is coming before the Planning Commission. As you may recall, this is a mandatory update of the housing element on an 8-year cycle. We've had several reviews, if you are referred to in our staff report, for community input, stakeholder hearings, and so forth. I think the highlights of this are, though, the regional housing needs allocation for this cycle of the housing element is only 240 units. And based on our analysis, we've got over enough land inventory for 504 units without using any land from the planned unit development zone. So that means that we can easily accommodate our regional fair share housing needs assessment. In terms of the parameters of the housing element, the programs were oriented towards consistency with state housing law requirements. In particular, there are several amendments that will need to process to be in compliance with state housing law, and that involves emergency and emergency shelters and transitional and supportive housing. Will need to come forward with subsequent amendments to make those facilities principally permitted in order to come into compliance with state housing law. There are a number of other activities that we've also initiated that we're performing on right now in terms of codifying some of the things from the previous housing element that are still moving their way through the Coastal Commission certification process. Those are also forthcoming. And then in your staff report, we've included an item on here. We had a kind of a lengthy letter from the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. I've attached that to your staff report. They've highlighted many of the things that I've just described, and in the memo, what we're saying is that we're going to continue to do these things on the same cycle that we're on. So, for example, right now we're in the process of updating the general plan. At the conclusion of the general plan, then we'll do the local coastal plan, and at the conclusion of that, then we'll do the zoning code and the coastal implementation program. And so that's when we've indicated the housing element we're going to perform on those other things. For example, in transitionary housing and emergency shelters. We previously circulated the initial study and negative declaration. We don't need to do any amendments to the general plan to comply with housing law because we easily meet our fair share of housing needs. And the rest of these amendments that I described are scheduled to go in the process that we're recommended. And the State Department of Housing and Community Development agrees with that and understands where we're headed to. Consequently, they've issued us the conditional letter of approval. So if all of this meets your need, I'm gonna let Catherine Pan cover some of the more highlights of the general plan element, the housing element, but the only other thing that we would need to do is we're pointing towards, if this is acceptable to the planning commission, going to the city council on December 16th for final adoption and transmittal to the state housing department. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you don't mind, maybe Catherine can cover some of the highlights of the housing element.
Yeah, I just wondered, are there any questions on the process? Or
Yeah.
or where we are, rather than on the housing
Yeah,
itself?
as a process question, and I just wanna make sure that everybody else kinda knows this. We're doing this because we are required to by California law, right?
Right.
And how often are we required to do this?
Once every 8 years.
Okay. And are we graded whether we accomplish these, or just do we have to show that we are capable of accomplishing it? Help me out on that process.
We've done both. We had the review of the previous the effectiveness report in the previous housing element cycle, and we performed on that. And yes, there are some things that we'll need to do, like transitional housing and emergency shelters, in order to be in compliance with state housing law, but those are programmed in our schedule of updates. So we expect to accomplish those in the next year to 2 years.
And tell me what penalties there are, if any, if we do not comply.
Catherine may want to jump in on this, but normally it's if we had a community development block grant program that would jeopardize funding through that program, but we don't fund through community development block grant for housing funds. So I'm not aware of any other implications other than that if we did fund through CDBG.
Thank you.
Thanks. Tom?
Yeah, through the chair. So Bruce, you mentioned in an email earlier today, do we need a 2/3 majority? Do we need all four of us to agree tonight?
Right.
2/3 majority threshold?
Because these are amendments to the general plan or any kind of code amendments requires 2/3. So that means 4 affirmative votes out of the 5 of you. Yes.
Thanks.
Bruce, I just have one quick question, and that's about the initial study in general. In your experience, is there ever an occasion where a housing element would require mitigation, or would require even an EIR?
Absolutely. If we had to rezone land for a higher density, absolutely.
But we don't have to do any of that because we have the demonstrated capacity. Okay, thanks. Catherine?
Hi, so I'm Catherine Pan. I'm a planner with Dyke & Bati, and we've been working with the city on these documents that you're reviewing tonight. If I can make this shorter. So I'm just going to give a brief presentation to follow up on the staff report that Bruce just described to you. And that's just going to be a quick background on the housing element and also some of the programs that it includes. And also I'm going to give you an update on things that have taken place since the last time this came before you in July, including just the review or the revisions that came out of the HCD review. So just some background on the housing element. It's one of 7 of the general plan elements that's required by California state law. And housing element policies focus on providing opportunities for housing development for all economic segments of the community. And they also try to remove undue constraints to housing production. Housing elements are reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development for compliance with state law. And they're also required to be updated every 8 years, as we were just talking about. And it's in the same cycle as the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategies that are mandated by SB 375. And it also has to be consistent with all the other elements of the city's general plan. So each housing element has a few required components. So this includes the housing needs assessment, and that includes a analysis of economic, population trends, and also some household characteristics, as well as the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, which says what the city's fair share of the region's housing is. There's also a chapter usually on constraints. That's governmental constraints and non-governmental constraints. Things like governmental constraints might include fees or other development conditions, and also non-governmental constraints can be things like construction costs and accessibility to funding. Then there's the land and resource inventory, and that identifies land that is suitable and also zoned appropriately for residential development in the city, and then also identifies resources at the federal, state, and local level, things like funding sources and also other programs that might support the development of housing. And then there's also the review of the existing housing element that Bruce is talking about, that goes and assesses the effectiveness of the implementation of the previous housing plan or housing element. There's also then the goals, policies, and programs, and the objectives that those are trying to achieve, and those are quantified in terms of what the city is trying to achieve and when it would like to do that. So here's the timeline of major milestones. So you can see the city's been working on this update since the beginning of the year, and that started with the Community Housing Forum. That was a stakeholders workshop for housing developers, housing providers, and also some advocates for special needs groups. So following the public input from that and from the Planning Commission meeting regarding needs and constraints, we presented a draft, public review draft over the summer. That was revised based off of some policy recommendations from the Planning Commission, and then the City Council approved that to be submitted to HCD for their mandatory review. So that review period is over. We received their comments back and we responded to them. And we've also completed the negative declaration and submitted that. And so following today's hearing, the next step would be for the City Council to have a hearing, probably December 16th. Yeah. So about the programs in the housing element, that includes some of the programs from the current housing element, as well as some new and revised programs. And those are determined based off of the assessment of the current housing element policies, as well as just some of the needs that we are hearing from the community. So for the policies that are carried over, the city actually assessed them for whether or not they were effective, how well they were implemented, and whether they were still really appropriate for the city. So those things that the city has already accomplished, or if they were determined to be infeasible, ineffective, or otherwise redundant, those were removed. And then new or revised policies were included where necessary to address ongoing housing needs and constraints, to help streamline the city's approach to implementation, and also to ensure city's compliance with state housing law. So all these programs, they're consistent right now with the current general plan and local coastal program update process. So they're, especially if the zoning code amendments are going along with that. And they also take advantage of a number of existing services and programs that are operated by the county and also some local nonprofits. The focus was to commit the city to things that it could reasonably accomplish and also still make a meaningful impact. So as for the HCD review, so we submitted that draft HCD in early August, and our reviewer identified only a few minor issues that we needed to address, and so we took care of those. There was no second formal review required for that, and then that updated version is what you have now. The city received its conditional certification letter also in October. The main condition of that was that the zoning ordinance be amended to be in compliance with SB2 in terms of emergency shelters. Other things that were changed included some addition of background material, and that included, just estimates of what it would cost to preserve or replace affordable housing units that were at risk. Also to clarify that the the water supply would be sufficient to accommodate the RHNA housing sites, and then also to describe the efforts that were made to include lower income households in the public participation process, as well as to clarify the city's timeline for submitting its amendments to the Coastal Commission. And there are also a few changes to the programs themselves, and those were really for a purpose of clarity, was to clarify some of the intent behind the programs, and also to clarify where the city was in terms of implementation for some of them. But there were no substantive changes to any of those programs or policies. So that concludes my summary. This is your resolution.
So, Mr. Chair, we're recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the initial study and negative declaration, and recommend that the City Council approve the housing element with the adoption of the initial study and negative declaration.
I think you ran out of battery, Bruce.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Bruce. Any questions for staff on the element itself? Commissioner Ron?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Catherine, so on the slide before the last, I guess, you mentioned that we have received a conditional certification letter from HCD contingent on the zoning ordinances that comply with SB2 for emergency shelters. So I noticed in the document itself, the implementation schedule is the LCP submitted to the California Coastal Commission by mid-2016. I guess my question is, I know we're undergoing this major update to the LCP, and that's going to cover a lot more ground than just SB2 and emergency shelters. Is there a thought that we maybe can split that off and meet the needs of this conditional certification as a separate package to the Coastal Commission?
In answer to your question, yes, absolutely. Yes. Sorry. Yes, absolutely. If the council directed us to move this ahead further, we'd be prepared to do that. If they wanted to move on this quicker, we'd be prepared to do that. So we gave ourselves a little bit extra time, but if the council wanted to move forward, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, it just seems like things that are that clear in black and white maybe can be fast-tracked, and having the LCP submitted by 2016, of course, as you know, doesn't mean that it's going to be approved in a timely fashion. So Bruce, I also had a question about Sam Carr's letter. Just that, I guess, as a matter of interest, more than anything, they talk about, on page 2, they talk about the implementation of a home ownership policy. They don't really describe it, what that means to them. Do you have any, okay, so I guess, are we addressing that, and if so, how?
From a staff perspective, we agree with that. If the city council wanted to take a more proactive stance on that, then by all means we could. Right now, with everything moving through the workload, that wasn't something that we thought would be important to identify at this juncture. But by all means, if the city council would like to consider that, we can move that along just faster too.
So do you know what the city of Hayward did? They refer to the city of Hayward's council and their version of this?
You know, I'm not familiar with it, but I'll bet that they fund through community development. I'll bet they have community development block grant funds or home funds or something. And we just don't participate in that portfolio of funding. So I think our options are going to be more limited than I think Hayward's would be.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Thanks, Tom. Else, anything? Pat? I just have a couple questions. I guess I'll start with the letter from HCD. On the very second, the last page, they note in that first paragraph, throughout the housing element process, the city must continue to engage the community, including organizations that represent lower income and special needs households, by making information regularly available and considering and incorporating comments where appropriate. I was just wondering, I know that the city has done that outreach so far in this process, but it's not, it's not complete, and this will be looked at again through the general plan process. I was just wondering, we're looking for confirmation that the city is going to continue to include these groups in the process going forward.
In some of the program elements, we have identified, if you will, a more proactive position on moving forward on some of these things. For example, below market rate, amending some of the below market rate ordinances, and also leveraging the resources of, that's one of the things that Catherine pointed out, leveraging the resources of housing providers to take advantage of programs that are already in existence or that we could use to maximize our limited resources.
I just want to make sure that the city is keeping that door open to everybody, especially those in these targeted demographics and situations that they're not necessarily in the loop on all of these things. So the more proactive the city can be with bringing people in, the better. That's all. Okay. In the element itself, page 6-5, under goal 2, this is policy 2I. The goal states facilitate and encourage development of high quality housing to meet the city's housing needs for a range of incomes and special needs. Policy 2I says the city shall encourage subdivision designs which maximize density where appropriate by continuing to provide for planned unit developments in the zoning code and by continuing to allow relaxation of parking and setback standards where appropriate for affordable developments. I'm curious why specifically targeting planned unit developments as being a key location for facilities that may encourage the special needs or lower income folks. Is there something about planned unit development districts that would make that easier, or is it just that it allows a broader range of possibilities in general?
I think the latter. I think it offers a wider range in general. Liz, Catherine, can you think of?
Well, the one thing I could think of is that in the local coastal program right now, there are some policies for planned unit developments that, it requires housing development to set aside a certain portion for low-income housing. So I think that those policies for those particular planned unit developments might be what it's referring to.
Yeah, that's right. There we have several PUDs to specifically target affordable housing. So maybe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a more fluid zoning designation than an R2 or commercial general.
Yes.
I was just curious why specifically PUDs, but I guess that makes sense. And knowing that the PUD districts and what to do or what not to do with them is going to remain a significant topic over the next 2 years or a year and a half, I felt it appropriate to inquire. Also on PUDs, on page 2.7, under, this is in the section of the, get back to it, in the section of constraints where the element speaks to the different districts that allow residential residential uses. It identifies the residential districts, the R1, R2, and R3 districts, as well as the commercial downtown and commercial residential, commercial general, and the commercial visitor serving that all allow for residential uses. I was surprised that the PUD zones that currently have residential uses, like the Amesburg PUD or the Andreotti PUD, which is a mixed-use PUD, or even the Ocean Colony, why that wasn't noted as a district that allows for residential uses.
Well, I think, this came up when we were at the city council, and the council thought it was important to differentiate that we could satisfy the regional housing need assessment allocation without relying on PUDs and just relying on build out of the base underlying zones without PUDs. I think.
Yeah, no, I think that was something that was discussed here too in July. We talked about that. I was just curious why, because it seems like, this wasn't the matrix. There's a matrix in here that breaks down, or a table that breaks down really well all the PUDs and what is and isn't allowed. It just seemed, it seems like a mission that perhaps it should have been noted, but I guess that direction came from council.
Well, then there is a discussion in here
Yeah.
about why PUDs were excluded from build-out calculations.
Yes, oh yeah, no, it just, here, it seems like it's noting that these are all the districts that allow residential development, whereas PUDs, there are PUDs that do allow for residential. Okay, are there any other questions for staff? No? Okay. I only have one green sheet for public comment. If there is, just a reminder for some of the folks that came in late, if you would like to speak on the record, there are green sheets at the table. We'll open up the public comment period with Robin Jeffs.
Is that on? My name is Robin Jeffs. I live in Ocean Island, Ashtown Place. I'm a part-time developer, although my official designation is an investment advisor. You have to be a part-time developer these days. I also own some commercial property in downtown Hartford Bay. I kind of got involved in inquiring into the housing element almost 8 years ago, I suppose, just after the previous one was done. And I forget exactly the number on the sheet that was going to be developed, but it was something like 200 or 300, I think. Of course, since that time, hardly any housing has been built in Hartford Bay at all. You've got the build out of the Colony, which was approved effectively 20, 30 years ago. And you've got some affordable housing projects that have been done. Apart from that, the single family housing that's been built in town over the last 10, 15 years has averaged about 5 or 6 houses a year. It hardly has met the replacement of units that have been removed, destroyed, or obsolete. So don't let's get the idea that we have fulfilled the housing element. In fact, I think the kind of effort that goes into this, commendable as it is a complete waste of time, because we're living in a kind of fictional world of something we don't produce. Now, you can have your reasons for agreeing with more housing or less housing, but I just want to point out we're nowhere near even replacing our existing housing stock. Our population is actually declining from the last census to this previous census. People think that the population is growing, but it isn't. And as a result, we have a town, I think, that is commercially, and I own commercial property, is declining. It's all related to the amount of people that can live here and shop here. I'm not in favor of major development, but we can't even replace our existing housing stock. It's something wrong. So I just think we need to face up to these facts and not continue to delude ourselves. We're nowhere near meeting our state obligations, and reducing ourselves into a shadow of a vibrant community, which we ought to be.
Thank you, Mr. Jess. Is there any other green comments? A couple, okay? Pass it on.
Hey Tom, everybody. Just to follow the comments from the previous speaker, Robin.
I'm sorry, could you state your name?
Sorry, I'm Rick Hernandez. I live at 360 Poplar Street. And we are one of those replacement houses that were built a few years ago. About 6 years ago, we finished our project. And we know how challenging it can be to build a house in Half Moon Bay. I reviewed the documents tonight, and the one observation I had is the regional housing needs analysis that was in this documentation seems to indicate that with infill housing, we have more than enough housing to meet the needs of the community, certainly for the next 7 years, which I think is the scope of the regional housing needs analysis. And it's about 200% of what is required to meet the regional housing needs for our community. And I just wanted to confirm that with the Planning Commission, that what I took from the staff report, the summary of the staff report is true, that given the needs that we currently have for housing within our community, we don't need to change anything with respect to what the regional housing needs are indicated. So I just wanted to confirm that with either staff or the Planning Commission that is in fact what documentation indicates.
Perhaps staff can clarify just where the arena comes from and what it means and what this document has to show.
You want to explain the RENA? It's a regional fair share housing needs assessment, and yes, I agree with that statement that we've proven that we can satisfy that number without any additional rezones or anything else with the underlying classification of the land has.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. The third green sheet I have is Jack McCarthy?
Yes. Hi, Jack McCarthy, 400 California Avenue, Moss Beach. I'm a former Planning Commission member. I wanted to reemphasize what the previous speaker just said about the in-place build-out rules and regulations we have seem to satisfy the growth projections and accommodations that are needed. And also, I wanted to express a little dismay at the documentation, in particular the San Mateo County Association of Realtors letter, which was very thoughtful, but I also noted that the Planning Commission seemed to say they agreed with the recommendations of SAMCAR, and among the recommendations were that PUDs and other special regulations be re-examined in light of new housing needs and as part of a negative declaration. And I don't think I don't agree with that, and I would oppose that because that's a very long developed law and regulations in Half Moon Bay, and it's also in the context of major traffic issues and build-out issues, and coastal view issues, and our special status as a coastal area. And so I really don't think that we can throw out the entire PUD system in Half Moon Bay. Has been developed over many years. So I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Unless anyone else wants to speak, we will close the public comment period and return the discussion to Commission. Have any thoughts?
How did we get involved in this? I think 5 or 6 years ago, I think when I first joined the commission, I guess the process essentially is the same. I would have to agree with Mr. Jeff, for example, that basically all we're showing here is that we are capable of meeting the requirements put on us as far as various kinds of housing. That doesn't mean we will accomplish it or are. And I think, again, from a process standpoint, I think that's all we are required to do at this point. Certainly there are things in this document that provide suggestions to facilitate this, and I don't have any issues with that. But I think this is basically a procedural matter, and reading through this, the fact that it's a negative deck implies that what we're doing here will not have any significant degradation on the environment, and certainly that's the case as it currently stands. So I think I just want to point out that this is really more procedural. It doesn't at this point say we are going to do certain actions or not, but we have instituted a process. We've done our homework. We've done the needed documentation and inventories that says we can meet the standards required of us by the state of California. So, I'm certainly, from what I've seen, I have no problems recommending approval of this to go to the city council next week, or whenever we're going to be doing that.
Yeah, so I guess I agree with Commissioner DeMann. I don't see this as a huge, something that is going to radically change the way things have been going for the last several years or more, and the way things are going to go in the future. I see this actually almost the cart before the horse. It's very, very heavily joined at the hip with the local coastal program. And you can see that flavor throughout this document. That defers a lot of the major decisions to that process, and it just has to be that way. Right, folks? That's really the right way to do it. So, I was also working on the previous document with Commissioner DeMann and Commissioner Johnson, and I remember the things we tried to achieve, some of which are in process now. As we also mentioned here, are things that are already up for approval at the Coastal Commission, and I think those are good things. The density homes at below market rate, the second units, residential units, and also there were things we worked on prior to these documents, like some of us recognized a long time ago that we have what are called substandard lots in this city, and one can view those as something you want to get rid of, and the policy 14, 15 years ago may have been, well, we want to combine those substandard lots and make them larger so you can build bigger houses on them. But some of us recognize, well, actually those are opportunities for low affordable housing, I guess is the right word. So we actually championed ordinance changes that facilitate that, the use of those lots. So I agree. This isn't a major earth-shaking document. I also think a negative declaration is appropriate on this, since we're not increasing densities, not changing zoning, and I would support approval of it. Okay.
Yeah, the main thing is that Measure D limits residential growth to 1%, and as we've seen here, what does it say? City Council assigned a total of 74 dwellings unit allocations, with 25 allocated with downtown area and the remaining 49 allocated. But at the end of the day, we haven't even, how many have we actually filled?
Been averaging about 25.
Right, so we're not even close to what we have. This is just documentation that basically is provided that we need to and have something in place. And like Mr. Roman said, it's clearly stated on page 2 here on the substandard issue lots, what it's being used for, and one of the designs was to actually create affordable homes with those smaller lots. So I think this document and the whole package is well written, and we have our safeguards in place.
Yeah, well, I I generally concur. It seems like this is just an update, bringing us up to as close as we can, and then we will be seeing it again in another, or we're looking to not necessarily revisit it, but update it or make sure it conforms over the next couple of years. It's an exercise, but it's required by law. Not hearing any objections.
Just one quick follow-up. So when I brought up the transitional emergency shelter part, there's a note in the HCD's letter about we could potentially end up in a 4-year cycle. And I'm thinking if we get that conditional approval closed out, that'll go a long way towards not kicking us into a 4-year update cycle. So I would suggest recommending that, or anything else you think might trigger that kind of a cycle to the council, just so we don't have to go there. Save a little work.
Is that how, it seems like that was stating if we don't adopt that element within 120 days of its due date, we go on a 4-year cycle. Is that a danger if we don't show compliance with the emergency or transitional shelter aspect?
Not that I'm aware of. I think, we're targeting this for December 16th. So we perform on the housing element.
No, I'm sorry, if as Commissioner Roman said, if we don't conform to their requirements, I guess the staple 2 regarding emergency shelters.
We're asking Sophie about that question too, and at any rate, we're aware of that, and we don't want that to happen. And if that were to occur, we would bring an item back to you and the city council if we were in jeopardy of losing the 8-year cycle we're on to a shorter cycle.
Commissioner Roman, would you recommend that we approve with encouragement that the council look to forward that with it?
Yeah, so assuming everybody else agrees, I think that if there are specific things, like, even if it doesn't kick us into a 4-year cycle, I think if there are clear things that can be handled and not have to wait for this large big bang of the LCP update, it's only a recommendation to council. Council doesn't have to do it, but I would certainly be in favor of that.
Yeah, I don't have any issues. Les, any issues?
Yeah, that works for me. So do you need something formal that says we recommend moving this to the council with the additional recommendation that they look to comply with the emergency housing? Is that in effect what you're looking for?
That would be helpful, sure.
All right, I so move.
You want to wrap it into a little bit more, Tom? You want to take it?
Okay, going to the formal, I recommend, or I move that we forward the housing element hearing draft to the city council for their approval, but adding the proviso that they add the emergency housing part that was requested by the agency. Does that?
Yes, sir.
Does that do it?
Yeah, and just to remind you, we have a resolution too, so that resolution, the motion is to adopt that resolution, and it has the underpinnings.
Okay, I guess I better read the formal words here, and then I won't get into trouble. Okay, adopt resolution number P-21-14, recommending that the city council certify a negative declaration and adopt the update to the housing element of the city's general plan, and we encourage the council to add an emergency housing element to this recommendation.
Got it.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. That concludes our public hearing items for tonight. Do we have any discussion items, commissioners? No one to discuss?
I was just wondering if anyone went to the,
I did, okay.
Okay.
Let me comment, there was a very nice reception held at the yacht club for the California Coastal Commission. And there are lots of people that represent various agencies around the area at the meeting. Basically, it was a good place to chat. I did not get an opportunity to speak with any of the Coastal Commission people, although I think I saw a picture of them walking around town. But all in all, it was a very nice affair. And I think those of you that did not attend missed an opportunity to talk with people that are interested in working with the California Coastal Commission.
Excellent. Any other discussion items? I would need to note that Commissioner DeMond and I were both in attendance at the November 13th General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. And just, it's not going to come as a surprise to everybody, but our next meeting, the 9th, I believe, there are some passionate people, and people are thoroughly engaged, and so it's we're getting into the real nitty gritty of it, land use and land use alternatives, and so it's all up there. It's going to be I suspect it will be a very vibrant meeting, just as the meeting on the 13th of November was. With that,
motion to adjourn.
motion on the table. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.